Well, we've got a rather spicy update in the Epstein saga. A judge by the name of Salas, I believe, has been the victim of a great tragedy. She is the judge that was recently assigned to well, it's not really an Epstein case, it's an Epstein-related case. I believe it's the Deutsche Bank shareholders bringing a lawsuit against Deutsche Bank over some transparency issues, but with specific reference to their involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. And so this is a case that, might lead to uncovering more about the truth of Epstein's, various misdeeds and perhaps who he was involved with, such as the people at Deutsche Bank. If we knew more about his financial history, we might be able to start to piece together what exactly was going on. Of course, Epstein was, his supposed backstory was that he was this high-profile, investment advisor or something like that, a big Wall Street guy, so he had dealings with these big banks. But since he has no known clients other than Les Wexner, it's highly likely that Epstein was in fact doing a lot of, I guess you could say, covert financial activities. And Deutsche Bank seemed to play a big role in all of that. Well, that might not be the case anymore, at least that we will uncover anything, because this judge has just been the victim of a home invasion of sorts. A man who apparently was dressed like a FedEx worker knocked on her door, and her son answered the door, and was shot and killed by this supposed FedEx worker. Her husband was also shot. She was in the basement and apparently didn't get hit. So the guy just opened they opened the door. The guy shot the two people who were in the doorway and ran away. And this happened just 4 days after she was assigned this Epstein-related Deutsche Bank case. And so, the way you look at it, it's hard not to think, well, maybe somebody's trying to give her a hint. If right after she gets assigned this Epstein case, bad things happen to her, well, maybe she shouldn't rock the boat too much. Or maybe she was already beginning to. Maybe, she has, not been willing to play ball with whoever, is making the rules. And I don't want to say anything for a fact, because, this is just speculation at this point, but, you get to a certain point that the conspiracy theories write themselves. Now, I get that the judge, herself didn't answer the door, and so, she wasn't injured, but I do, and that seems like a reasonable explanation, but, you look at this simply as, well, if I were trying to intimidate this woman, I wouldn't try and harm her directly. I wouldn't want to kill her, because then the case would just go to another judge. Instead, it makes a lot more sense to hurt those around her, to try and intimidate her and say, hey, do you want to be next? If anything, this is going to have I would think, a significant impact on her state of mind. Her son was just murdered in her own home, and her husband was seriously injured because he was shot too. And given that this guy didn't come in and steal anything, he just wanted to kill, or he just wanted to shoot at people, and he was, dressed as a FedEx guy, so it was definitely a premeditated sort of thing. He was trying to fool these people into opening the door for him. I don't think it's at all conspiratorial to say that this was, clearly just a targeted attack on this woman and her family. Of course, it also might have been someone who wanted to, to hurt her husband, since I was reading he's a defense attorney, so maybe, I don't know who gets disgruntled against defense attorneys other than prosecutors, but I just want to point out that is a possibility. But the simplest solution in this case, given that it very much it's almost certain that this was a targeted attack based on, how it was carried out, and the fact that this guy didn't come in and try and steal anything. He wasn't a robber. That the most likely, the motivation of whoever did this was related to the Epstein case. That's the most high-profile thing that she has going on. that is the case with the highest stakes, with the the most money involved, the most powerful people involved. So if there was anything that she was dealing with that would earn her sort of the ire of some bad people who would want to do her harm, it would be that Epstein Deutsche Bank case. So I hope that this story gets the attention that it deserves. I imagine that maybe the mainstream media won't pick up on it so much, but hopefully enough people will see the obvious connection here, and will connect the obvious dots. I don't think I'm reaching too far with this, and of course this wasn't my idea anyway. I saw it first on Zero Hedge, but there are other sites mentioning this, putting in the headline that, hey, the judge in this Epstein case just had her son murdered. Newsweek, Financial Times, I think I saw, were the top two results, and they both included the Epstein link in their headline. And so the public really needs to collect this information. They need to keep this in mind, and people need to spread, what's going on to make it more difficult if this is in fact, a part of the cover-up operation, to make it essentially meaningless. Because if you continue to expose the cover-up at every stage, it becomes impossible to actually cover up the facts. When it's just plain and obvious like this, like it was when when Epstein was killed, or was allowed to commit suicide, depending on how you look at that. Either way, he shouldn't have died he did not die without help. I'll put it that way. So if the public ever wants to see any sort of justice in this whole situation, or learn anything close to the truth, we'll never know the whole truth. We probably won't even know the partial truth. But if we want to know any truth at all, then folks have to keep on this, because that's really what will continue exposing this. Because the only thing that keeps whatever the powers that be from covering this up is the interest of the public. Whoever it is that was connected to Epstein wants to keep him and his whole, and all of his crimes and all of his buddies out of your mind. That's what a cover-up is. It's trying to cover up information. And so spreading knowledge is the way you fight that. And if they're getting to this point, if this truly was related to the Epstein stuff, if they're getting to the point to where they're willing to attack a judge, a federal judge, in her own home, then things are getting pretty serious. I mean, to say that this would be the biggest story of the century, or of the last 20 years or something like that, that would definitely be an understatement, given the amount of pushback and effort that's been put into the cover-up. And I don't usually talk about what might have been going on with the Epstein stuff, because I don't know. That's why we kind of have to need the facts. That's the problem with the cover-up, is I just don't know exactly. There's been, speculation that makes a lot of sense. I think, some of the obvious stuff that we can pretty much assume to be true is that it was, related to intelligence. Actually, no, that's confirmed by Alex Acosta, that Epstein was owned by intelligence. Ghislaine Maxwell's father was a super spy. Things like this. This is the intelligence connections are everywhere. And so we can confirm that sort of stuff. But beyond that, I have no idea what they were doing, whether it was a blackmail operation or something like that. Sure, that makes sense, but again, we don't have hard facts on this. And so it's all meaningless unless we get specifics, unless we are able to name names, unless we know what exactly was going on, who did what, when they knew it. And of course, it doesn't really mean anything unless the general public is informed about all of that. That's the only way that it's going to impact human history, is if, these details are exposed, and the people connected to Epstein, can be viewed by the public for what they are. So with that said, if you get anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.